In 63 BC, Gaius Julius Caesar began his long political career, being elected Pontifex Maximus. Caesar then began eagerly climbing the political ladder. The following year, he was elected as praetor and given the governorship of Hispania Ulterior. After a very successful governorship in Spain, he was hailed as imperator by his troops, gaining him the right to a triumph in 60 BC. For Caesar, this was a problem, because he had ambitions of being elected consul, and active commanders were forbidden from entering Rome. This forbade Caesar from declaring his candidacy for consul, so Caesar did the unthinkable. He laid down his command and marched down to the Forum to announce his candidacy for consul, forfeiting his triumph. Caesar would end up winning the consulship in 59 BC by forming an alliance with the general Crassus and the general Pompey, two of Rome's most powerful men, the first triumvirate. During his term as consul, Caesar would pass a land reform bill and many other minor bills to pay back political favors to Crassus and Pompey. But the crowning achievement of his consulship was securing for himself the governorships of Cisalpine Gaul, Transalpine Gaul, and Illyricum. These positions were important to Caesar because in his bids for Pontifex Maximus, praetor and consul, he paid out a fortune in bribes and was deeply in debt, and the northern region of Gaul was ripe for conquest and plunder to fill his coffers. In 58 BC, Caesar was met with his first opportunity for war. The Helvetii, a tribe from modern-day Switzerland, began a migration across southern Gaul, crossing into Roman territory. With this excuse, Caesar marched with 6 legions against them, beating them at the Battle of Bibracte, causing them to return home. Caesar would spend the following years marching north and west against the Gallic forces, notably the Belgae in present-day Belgium, who he met in battle with 8 legions, defeating them at the Battle of Sabis. The campaign against the Belgae was a turning point in Caesar's conquest of Gaul, as here he stopped reacting to the events around him and started imposing his will on the local tribes. Caesar, near the end of his governorship, met with his political allies at the Lucca Conference, instructing them to run for consul, to give him an extension on his governorship and for 5 more years, and to secure for themselves powerful provinces. Now that Caesar had reached the North Atlantic, his ambition and his quest for glory got the better of him, and he planned for an invasion of Britannia. This plan was nearly complete in 55 BC, when Caesar got word that Germanic tribes were raiding eastern Gaul. With haste, Caesar marched back to the Rhine River and did the unthinkable. He built a bridge across the Rhine, being the first Roman to enter Germany. Facing no opposition, Caesar left after 19 days, burning his great bridge behind him. Later in the year, with his beloved 10th Legion and 7th Legion, Caesar crossed to Britannia. After a short, indecisive campaign, Caesar was forced to return home. Still with an eye for glory and ambition, Caesar planned the second invasion of Britain for the following year, building the largest naval fleet ever seen before World War II. Caesar would scatter the Breton forces in battle near the Thames River, but would be forced to return to the coast and subsequently Gaul after a storm destroyed his fleet. Caesar's campaigns in Britain would be deemed a success, though they would leave no lasting Roman control over the island. In 53 BC, a Gallic chief named Vercingetorix rose up in revolt, capturing Alesia. With 8 legions, the siege of Alesia would be Caesar's crowning achievement in the Gallic Wars, building 2 sets of walls back to back. With the 2 walls, the legions survived massive onslaughts from both sides from hundreds of thousands of Gauls, eventually scattering them and subjugating all of Gaul for the next 200 years. In Rome, the Senate grew weary and fearful of Caesar's growing power. The triumvirate had fallen apart with the death of Crassus in Syria, and Pompey was now jealous of Caesar's new power. The Senate tried to recall Caesar to Rome, but knowing that the Senate was trying to humiliate him and strip him of all political power, Caesar marched into Italy with the 13th Legion in 49 BC. Crossing the Rubicon River, the legal boundary of Italy, where no active commander was allowed to take his army, declaring war on the Senate. Let the die be cast. What followed was a long and bloody civil war. The former friend and ally, Pompey, led the Republican forces against Caesar. When word of Caesar's crossing reached Rome, the Republican forces and the Senate fled to Greece. This gave Caesar control of all of Italy, without a fight. Caesar quickly went about securing his position in Italy, sending legions to Sicily and Sardinia, while he marched to Spain, and there, again without any bloodshed, the Republican forces surrendered. He also met up with his old friend, legate Marcus Varro, who surrendered his 2 legions in pacifying Hispania. The short campaign was a resounding success for Caesar, who destroyed much of the Republican power bloc, Pompey's 6 legions. Caesar then raced across his territory, heading for the Adriatic Sea. From there he intended to cross Macedonia, where the Republican forces were hiding. Caesar was able to get 3 of his legions across before an old political rival, Bibulus, reinstated the Republican blockade, leaving 2 of Caesar's legions in Italy unable to help him. At Dicarium, Rome's 2 great generals, Caesar and Pompey, would meet as enemies. Pompey outnumbered Caesar nearly 3-1. Caesar, using his strategy he learned in Gaul, would build a ring of fortifications around Pompey's camp, biding his time, waiting for Mark Antony and his 2 remaining legions. Pompey learned of Caesar's weakness and quickly punched through. The bulk of Caesar's army was able to escape without being pursued by Pompey. Meeting up with Mark Antony, he retreated to the city of Palaris, where Caesar, now with 23,000 men and Pompey's 52,000, would meet in the open field. Caesar used his veteran legionaries, who would expertly maneuver around the Republican forces, collapsing their left flank, circling around, turning the battle into a slow slaughter. Pompey and the senators would escape to Africa, and Caesar, looking over the battlefield, would be haunted by the sight of Romans killing Romans. Caesar would follow Pompey and the senators to Egypt, only to find that they had been killed by agents of the pharaoh Ptolemy. Egypt was embroiled in its own civil war at the time, and angry with Ptolemy for killing Pompey, Caesar sided with Cleopatra. Caesar was now close to being the undisputed master of Rome. The Republicans had one last major stronghold in North Africa, so Caesar set sail with 7 legions for the North African coast. 46 BC, the Republicans struggled from mass desertion to Caesar's army. They met him at the Battle of Thapsus, backed by the Numidian king Juba. In the end, for Caesar, there wasn't much of a battle. The Numidian king Juba fled the field without ever fighting, and many Republican forces just surrendered as soon as fighting began. And those that didn't were slaughtered, much to Caesar's dismay. Back in Rome, Caesar faced one last challenge to his power. His beloved 10th Legion mutinied. Angry when they had not received pensions after so many years of service, they decided to march on Rome. Caesar would ride out to meet them himself, calling on their honor as Romans to lay down their arms and return loyally to service to the state, effectively saving the city. Caesar would then go on to push through many minor reforms as he did his year as consul, increasing his popularity with the common man. His most notable reform was remaking the Roman calendar to look much more like the one we have today, renaming the month of his birth Quintilis to Julius. Caesar never called himself king or emperor, but many senators were beginning to fear that he was becoming such. The Liberators, as they were called, were a faction of the Senate who planned to assassinate Julius Caesar. In the Ides of March, 44 BC, Gaius Julius Caesar was stabbed 23 times on the floor of the Senate.